I think
Coming
a
up on
big piece
Unleash
of the movement
Thyself.
of like manifestation and things like that today is like release the weight so then you call it in. That's still putting weight on it because you're releasing the weight to call it in. And so technically you're using spirit ideas.
Welcome to Unleash Thyself, a podcast where we journey into the depths of personal transformation, spirituality, and growth. I'm your host, Constantine, and today we welcome back Ashley Abramson. Now, this is the second part of the episode that you probably have listened to already, and you haven't. You probably should go check that out. But Ashley is an amazing friend, the voice behind Big Miracle Energy, and she's been on the show a few times. And her and I are now going to dive into a beautiful topic, one that most of us probably could use a bit more perspective on. I know I can, and that's just the money story, and that's
Right.
heavily tied from what I've seen to the self-worth story.
Mm.
And for me, Ashley, as we jump into this, I've had quite the breakthroughs in the last couple of weeks through my own practices. But before I share about mine, I'm curious to see, first, welcome to this show again. You've been here so many times, but also, like, how have you been able to unpack your money story over the years?
Oh, geez. Well, first of all, I'm happy to be back. This will now be my third time, in like this time I'm wearing the same clothes because we're recording right in a row. But money story, money story. Oh my gosh, money has, that what's this? Money is the root of all evil, and I know a lot of personal development teaches you like become friends with money, and Uh, yeah, cultivate this beautiful relationship with money. And I did that for a period of time, or, really went on that journey. And what I found for myself is it's just like cultivating a relationship with the ego. And that's not something I'm seeking. So my money story has really been a journey of like unwinding from any money story, and really not having the pendulum over here where I hate money, and not having the pendulum over here where I love money, but having the pendulum right in the middle where it's just like, it's just a thing. It's just something in the illusion that comes in and goes out, and there yeah, that's really where and don't get me wrong, like, I'm not fully there yet. Like, there's still, like you said, there's stories that come up along the way, and, there's been some recently, but that's really where I'm stepping into more and more, and when these stories come up, I'm able to release them more and more. But that's my quick synopsis of kind of my journey.
Yeah, it's a very interesting take. I like that. And what came up for me is like people talk about changing your money story. And I feel, I mean, that's pretty much what you were saying but to the point of like not changing it as most of us would think, which is take it from, let's say, the negative to the positive, but more to the point of become aware of what it is. That's my interpretation. Become aware of what it is and find harmony in your life with it. Like, don't put any weight on it, good or bad, indifferent. It's really irrelevant at the end of the day. And how can we get to a point where it doesn't negatively influence our life and it just is part of it? It's the energy of exchange, for example, or whatever
Yeah.
else it is for you. And like we talked in the first part of this recording, Ashley, it's like this idea of stories of our life, right? And money story, it's a story too, right? And it's usually a story made up of many other smaller stories from people in your life. And this past weekend, or I should say the past 2 weeks, really, I've been invited through my various guides and mentors in this illusion and outside of this illusion, through my spiritual guides, to truly dive a bit deeper and understand what my story actually is. But not from the point of view, like we were talking earlier, of like needing to know exactly what happened and how it happened and all of that, but more around like how it's manifesting in my life and what are the stories or some of the stories behind it.
Mm.
And this past weekend, I was invited to sit with the Golden Teachers, which is a psilocybin mushroom, for those not aware. And I had this deep journey in which, for a good chunk of it, it was a very difficult journey, but it was a journey in which I wasn't shown me with my self worth story. I was shown people around me first. So people that raised me, people in my life, and how their stories of not being enough, not having enough, not getting enough, not receiving enough were essentially being mirrored outside of them. And me being the happy go lucky kid, I would pick up on them. And I would then make it my story. And then he showed me how those stories then started to show up everywhere in my life, in my personal relationship, in my business relationships, and everywhere. Because from the outside, it may look like I've had a very successful life and career in terms of financials and progress. But then you can also see it the other way, is that yes, it's been successful, but not really. Because money comes in, money goes out. Money comes in, that goes up. Things like that many people can look at, and it's like, oh, that was part of my story. Meaning that, like, I had all these stories made up of how money is not good, like you mentioned, the root of all evil, how money, um, people that have money are not good people, right? Like things like that subconsciously will not make you, get you to take actions that you don't realize you're taking. Now, here's the cool thing. So he showed me all of that. And then he showed me how abundance is all around us, but how the ego mind is preventing us from seeing the abundance for what it is. Because if it doesn't show up in a certain way that you perceive abundance, so in my case, monetary, let's say, or material, then it's not good enough. So then you don't see that. So what came up for me, which was really interesting, was this idea that I haven't been fully accepting the abundance that others are willing to share with me. And because I'm not accepting a lot of the abundance that's being shared with me, it creates almost like a queue of people that want to bring abundance into my life, but they can't because I haven't accepted the one before that. So it's kind of like blocking the queue. The visual I had was this funnel, right? You have all these people at the top coming in to provide abundance, but there's a blockage at the root of the funnel because I'm not accepting it. So the people are just waiting there forever. Situations, people, whatever you may. And then he showed me how, like, once I remove or shift my perspective, so shift my stories, the flow starts coming through again. And abundance can look in so many ways. And I have a beautiful, beautiful example from this first retreat I'm hosting, which I'll share in a bit as a story. But that's what I feel like how life throws us these beautiful curveballs, because every time I unpack a story, like when, for example, Ashley, when they told me, my guides were like, okay, now you're going to remember your healing and your channeling abilities. I literally laughed out loud. This was like beginning of this year, because I'm like, I'm a mathematician. I'm a computer scientist. I like psychology, right? I work in corporate. Why would I be a healer? Why would I be a channeler? Like, come on, this is a joke. And then they were so gracious. They're like, well, you have examples. Literally, you just channeled for someone in this room 2 hours ago. And they gave me the example. And then they're like, well, you provided healing without you realizing to someone just 3 days ago. Go back to your messages and you're going to see the messages where she mentioned that you sharing your story, a voice note, allow her to heal something that's been dragging her down for the last 4 years. This was a friend of mine. And she literally said it in the messages. But of course, our ego mind or my brain wasn't letting me see all of that. And the same thing with the money story. I've had examples in my life where I approached it from the way of like seeing abundance in everything around us. And then I got more abundance. But most of the time, it wasn't that way. It was expecting it to come a certain way. So then it goes back to the how and the outcome that you and I talk about a lot. Like when we make it our business, then it becomes a challenge because we pretty much overlook all the potential abundance around us. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that it's beautiful, and I mean, what I'm hearing is just the reminder that was brought to you that, like, everyone is offering abundance to you because you are everyone. And right now, the money stories that you had have you siloing what abundance
Yeah.
is, when abundance is is what you are. So that means like even those individual people that you saw in the funnel don't actually exist as individual people in the funnel. It's just this one all encompassing. And that's why when you remove that story, it flows. And we've done a live before about abundance, and really it's where are you seeking your abundance, right? When you seek your abundance in the illusion, so seek it in money, in success, in fame, and a marriage, children, whatever. If you seek it in the illusion, it will run out, it will run dry, it will be taken from you, it can be manipulated, because it's not true abundance. True abundance is sought in spirit. When you tap into the well of spirit or your highest self, that's where the flow of abundance is nonstop. And to me, when I got that visual, it was the reminder that through relation is how we forgive and heal. So all those people in your funnel, it's not necessarily that they are going to give you abundance. They're going to remind you of the abundance you already have when you use the relationship for the forgiveness opportunities that it is. Um,
Yeah.
and
What a,
yeah,
what a
that's what I saw.
beautiful, what a beautiful way to look at it. Absolutely. Because here's the example I had in my life just from this past week that blew me away. So, for those not aware, I'm preparing for my first retreat, Costa Rica, right? Talking to a private chef so we can have beautifully crafted meals. And of course, as you can imagine, any private chef, it doesn't matter where you are in the world, it's going to cost a pretty penny. And one of the things is when we budgeted for this retreat, my business partner and I, we came up with a fixed price for how we're gonna charge for the rooms, and it was gonna be a reasonable price. It was pretty much a cost with a bit of buffer, right? And of course, as the weeks progressed and we were going through filling the retreat out and getting all the details, one of the places I was encouraged by my guides in my journeys to challenge is how we price the retreat. Like, the retreat is all about helping individuals, including myself, right, like as a facilitator, to go deep within oneself, to find the self-leadership, to nurture the self-leadership, that forgiveness actually talks about, the healing aspect. And it's about abundance of like all the things that you have around you. But when the price was very fixed, it cut the flow of abundance, because there are people out there that want to come, but they can't afford it. And that cuts into that nurturing aspect of it, abundance. So I was challenged to find a different way that's maybe going against the status quo, in which we can price this retreat, and then everyone wins in the end, right? And then, Ashley, you may know this, that the model of pay from the heart came up. So there are some seats that will be fully sponsored by me in this case, or others that are more abundant material and can sponsor people. There are some seats that are partially sponsored, right? 50%. And then regular price seats. And then again, like if someone is in a better financial position, they can opt to pay more to sponsor someone else. So that was nice. That was awesome. I'm like, okay, that feels nice. But now we created another challenge, because when we factored in the budget and everything else, and we said we're making this at cost, pretty much, we had budgeted a certain amount for food and this private chef. So now the question is like, well, yeah, it's going to cost us a lot of money that we hadn't budgeted for or don't necessarily have. So what do we do now? And I put out this problem, you can say, to God, to spirit, to higher self. I said, you know what? I need help. This is creating too much anxiety. I'm focusing too much on the how and the outcomes. I need help. So sure enough, a week later or so, which was last week, one of my friends messages me and she's like, hey, I know someone in Costa Rica. She's from the States, but she spends like half a year there. And she does her own retreats, but she loves to prepare meals. And she's like, I'm going to get you in touch with her. And she did. A week goes by, and this lady reaches out, and she's like, hey, I prepared a sample meal for you for the 5 days your retreat is. And so let me know what you think. So I open up the document. The document is awesome. The prices are about 65% of what the other person was charging me. So I'm like, cool, that's awesome. But then the reality of this world came in, meaning that like she was actually not local to where we are hosting the retreat. In fact, she's 8 hours away. Well, she doesn't have a place where we are going to host the retreat, so that means that she has to use the kitchen at the retreat facility, which is fine. It's a big villa, it has a nice kitchen. But then the next reality came in. It's like, well, she doesn't have a place to sleep in, her and her assistant. So immediately my ego is like, well, I can't give up a room. That's going to cost me a lot more money. Now, keep in mind, at this point, I still had a few rooms available. So technically, it wasn't cost me anything. But all I could think of is like, no, this is going to bring the price up. And I said, thank you, but I don't think this is going to work out. We kind of went back and forth. She agreed, yeah, it's going to bring up the cost too much. And then only half an hour or so passed by, and I realized, wait a second, am I looking at this the wrong way? Here's someone, and a part of the story I didn't mention yet is that she really wanted to work with us, especially with this friend of mine that was what that referred her, because she'll be part of the retreat. And I was like, she really wanted to be there. And I'm like, she's offering her services. And here's the other kicker. Her assistant, she's actually a photographer and videographer, which is something I've been looking for because we don't have one and we want to document this for testimonials, but also for like posterity and to promote the next retreats. So I was like, okay, well, how can we make this a win-win for everyone? And I was starting to challenge my own ego, but it was still very prickly, right? It's like, no, I can't. This is going to cost me too much money we don't have, all this stuff. So I told her, I'm going to look at the solution that's going to allow us to both win, and I'll get back to her. This was last Wednesday. Friday, I talked to my business partner, JC, about this, and she likes the idea. I'm still very resistant. And Sunday, before my journey with the medicine, I was at the spa going deep in my meditation, and a thought came up, a challenge came from spirit, if you may. It's like, what if I'm looking at this the wrong way? What if I'm looking at abundance? This is literally someone offering their gifts to me. And because they're not coming a certain way, I'm rejecting it. What if I'm looking at this the wrong way? So long story short, I reached out to her and I said, okay, well, here's the situation. I can give you a room. You can cook the meals, and I want to find a win-win scenario because I'm giving up a room. You're giving up your services. You're going to, take a bus for 8 hours. How can we make this a win-win? Long story short, it comes out that they'll come there, the two of them, that just want to participate and have the room and not charge us anything on top of the food, the cost of the food. So now we win, they win. My cost went down significantly. The quality now increased because instead of the food being cooked in a separate location and then brought to us, this is freshly made in the location. So still a private chef. I'm going to have a photographer now and a videographer to track the entire thing. And if this wasn't an example of abundance, I didn't realize it until after my journey, and they were challenging me. It's like, hey, you have examples of how you can accept what others are giving you. It won't look like you're expecting it right now, but it's going to be filling you with abundance. So it's kind of that going back to that system of bartering, which I feel like you and I and Patrick talked about briefly at some point. It resonates. But anyway, so this story like reminded me so much of like, this opportunity I would have missed completely had I not gone back and asked questions of myself and not been on this path. And I'm sure I missed so many looking back at my life where people literally want to give from their heart, but because it doesn't look the way you want it to look, you're not going to be accepting it.
Well, you're not even going to see it. And
Yeah.
this goes exactly to the conversation we had on Patreon a couple weeks ago and why we started the text message. So you need to send this in the message because this is one of the things we were all going to share is like how
Yes,
we're
that's what it came up.
seeing,
Yes.
seeing abundance in miracles that aren't related to money because so often we're taught like abundance is money when money is a man-made thing. It has nothing to do with abundance. Like true abundance is spirit, not some man who's like, here's some pieces of paper and coins and a bunch of numbers in a computer, right? And so what I hear, and I invite you, like in Lighthouse, we're actually going to do this, is anytime you are really reflecting on someone else doing something for you or to you or whatever, see them as yourself. So what I hear actually, Constantine, is that yourself wanted to show you the abundance that you are, but you were not willing to accept what
Mhm.
yourself was offering to yourself. And it
Pretty much.
took a miracle because a miracle is a shift in perspective. It took you coming to this kind of almost a back against the wall moment in my mind. It may not have been a major one, but one where it was like, we need a chef and we can't afford a chef. And so you started to grapple with these new ways. And to me, the moment of forgiveness was when you went to your guides, you went to spirit, you went, to your highest self and said, help me see this differently. Right. And then the miracle was presented. Right. And a miracle doesn't always look favorable or, what you were seeking. Like, this is a beautiful example of when it all aligns very quickly, right? But lots of times miracles can shift it way down the road or previous. But to me, it was you showing yourself. Like, literally, Constantine, we had this conversation about abundance the week prior, the Sunday prior on the Patreon call. And so it's so curious that that sparked you beginning to like look for the abundance that wasn't money, and then the following sun, like, you were opening to it. Like, this is the process of forgiveness and releasing and accepting the miracle. That's what I hear. Like, it has nothing to
Yeah,
do.
and I mean that started even before the Sunday, right? That's why for me it was like the Friday before the Sunday was like I had this waking up and I was like about to meditate and I'm like, man, I was thinking about the retreat and some abundance stuff and the money story came up again. And it was like, it's like you have, the more you look back, you have these examples of how this is building on each other, right? And there's more seeds getting planted and then eventually they sprout under the right conditions. And that's what, the conversation the Sunday before did, then the conversation with this person, then everything else that unfolded beyond that. Hey, it's Constantine here, and I want to take a brief moment to truly thank you for being a part of this incredible journey of transformation. You are the reason we are creating this content. I see you and I appreciate you. Your support truly means the world to me. I want to ask you for a small favor. I'd love for you to join our mission by hitting like, subscribe, or leaving a thoughtful comment or review. Your engagement helps others discover these insights, and together we can continue to unlock the power of authenticity and personal transformation. Thank you for being a part of this movement. Now, back to the episode.
Yeah, it's sparking remembrance. I mean, it's a constant
Yeah.
spark of remembrance in the process. And I mean, it's such a beautiful representation of spirit interacting with spirit. Like you said, she wins, I wins, which is a common levels of leadership statement. But what I actually hear is like, you became one. It was no separation of her winning and you winning. It was a oneness. And in
Yeah.
oneness, everyone wins, right? Because no one can lose. So to me, it was like really coming together. And I'm a firm believer that when it comes to monetary whatever, whether it's money or bartering or, any sort of exchange of goods or services, if it is spirit led and it is meant to be a part of your journey, you will have the means to obtain it. The things that you don't have the means to obtain are the things that are not meant to be a part of your journey, at least not in this moment.
Yeah, I can see that too. And like the other big realization I had this weekend, I mean, after the journey, because the way it was brought up first, as I mentioned, was that self worth piece around enoughness, like not feeling enough, having enough, doing enough, getting enough. And I actually wrote down something here in my in WhatsApp to myself. It's like they came up only today, like 3 days later, this idea that if you're not feeling like you are enough, so not good enough, not smart enough, whatever the case might be, not worthy enough, right? How can you fully accept the abundance around you? So really, that was the message I got. It's like not being enough or not feeling enough is what caused me to not accept all this abundance around me. Yeah, and I would accept some and not accept others. So the more you tap into that story of enoughness, the more you spot the abundance around you. And like you say, it doesn't have to be just like monetary, material, physical, emotional, spiritual, all that abundance that exists around you.
Yeah.
Now,
I mean, and to me, like the story of not enoughness is the belief that we're an individual. So then that would mean we're separate, which when you're separate, that means there's things to obtain and there's things to not have. There's the haves and the have nots, and there's you have something, you don't have something. So really stepping into the abundance is the wholeness, and that's how the flow is consistent when you start to unwind those narratives. I mean, money used to be such a heavy narrative for me. If anybody's heard of my journey, I think I talked about it on our first episode we recorded, of how like I lost everything. My business was making tons of money. I was super successful, and I was, the definition of success in regards to business. Um, and it just was gone overnight, and it was really this shedding of some deep narratives of worthiness around money and success and numbers and all this, and I went over $100,000 in debt. And it was this journey of coming back. And now it's funny because I think we talked about this before, me, you, and Patrick, about how now that I have money, I just want to like give it away, but not in the manner of like, I'm not worthy of it. It's more in the manner of like, I know it's all of ours, right? I know it's like this oneness. So I'm not here to hoard money. I'm not here to, hoard anything anymore. I'm really here to just be this vessel for spirit to flow. And the more I step into that, the more the flow happens. And I heard, gosh, I was listening to something the other day, and it talked about how essentially at the end of our life, it's all like even anyway, right? So you're sitting, you're hoarding or, collecting or whatever, but like none of that can come with you when you leave this earth. So you're always gonna end the game, let's say, at an even, at a zero, right? You're always gonna end the game at a zero. So why do we have this need to throughout the game have higher than a zero, or feel bad if we're lower than a zero? Because it's always going to end in zero. You know how it's going to end. What does it
Yeah.
matter? Right? So it's really about just allowing the flow to flow through you. And when you feel that you need to collect money or you need the money, then your hands are closed. You're like, this is mine, 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 mine. And in order for things to flow, you have to be like this. So you have to be willing to allow what to come. And so that's listening to spirit, right? It's about being the vessel and using the things that you have for the betterment of all, for spirit. So there might be moments where you feel inspired to send some money to a person, or to buy someone this, or to give them something of yours that you like. And it's not about then you are lacking, right? Because that's a big thing. That's a big thing we see, is like when we give, we're lacking. That's not the case. In giving is receiving. So as you give, you're receiving. And the more you really encompass that, the more like it really looks that way. It's just this constant in giving is receiving. And don't get me wrong, man, I feel like I was so much better at understanding that and actually integrating it when I had no money, when I had nothing, because it was like you can't take blood from a turnip. And like I could really sit back and, like Patrick said, the more I get money, he sees how that flow happens with me. But I also see where the anxiety creeps in more. The more money I have, the more I worry about not having it. And I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like we are so far from the 100K. Like what? Like we have everything. Anytime something needs to happen, it aligns, right? And if it doesn't align, it wasn't meant to happen, right? Everything is meant for spirit. Yeah, I don't know. I could go on and on forever, because really money just, it's not a thing. I don't check my bank account unless all of a sudden like I have a big bill I need to pay and need to make sure there's money in there. And that was one thing my business mentor taught me. He was like, check your bank account multiple times a day. Like you have to cultivate this loving relationship to bring something in. And I call BS on that. I think the more you place weight on it, either way, loving or hating, the more it's running you, it's operating you,
Yeah,
and that's coming from the ego. So to me, it's like it just is. It's just a thing.
yeah, it's beautiful. And I love the
Yeah.
examples you gave as well. Yeah, no, I can totally see that. Right. And in the example of checking it multiple times a day, I mean, that's giving it control over you, right? I mean, what's that
Mhm.
supposed to do? Because if you don't have enough, it's going to continue creating anxiety. If you have more than enough, it's probably going to continue creating anxiety until you address the root cause,
Yeah.
which is what you're talking about, where there's just flow and no challenge. And I love that. And it's funny though, because the more I look at this, it's like to me it keeps going back to the self-worth piece, right? Because it's like you said too, it's like it's, do you give it out of not feeling worthy enough to hold on to it, which is the story of many of us. And like, for example, why I myself went into that quite a bit, because money would come in and it would go out just as fast, but then even more.
Mhm.
And in part was because you wanted to. In my case, I wanted to like create more,
Mhm.
but in part was also because I was looking for an escape. It's like, oh, I'm getting this money to escape the fact that, I don't know, let's say I worked 80 hours a week to make this money,
Mhm.
and I was
Yeah.
miserable on the inside. Yeah, so it's very interesting. It is definitely a topic that I feel many people are going through right now, and they're being challenged on their money stories. At least I
Mhm.
see it popping up everywhere more than before. And it's definitely a story like any other story in your life that's important. And it's about, to me right now, it's about understanding at least parts of the story, and not necessarily knowing all of it, and just trusting that you have the tools to navigate it and go through it. And
Mhm.
whatever comes on the other side will be more abundant than before, that's for sure. Like
Mhm.
outside of any challenge, once you overcome it, there's abundance on the other side of it.
Mhm. Yeah. And I think,
Yeah.
that's tricky too, because when I think a big piece of the movement of like manifestation and things like that today is like release the weight, so then you call it in. That's still putting weight on it because you're releasing the weight to call it in. And so technically you're using spirit ideas for ego decisions. So you've still already decided the outcome. So it's still very much in the ego, and it still has weight, and it still has a story. And it's really about like surrendering and releasing the stories with no expectation of outcome, right? Like I asked a client one time, she's an artist, an amazing artist, and she puts so much weight on herself about, not being in a certain place and not making all this money from artistry, and and it causes her to not have inspiration at moments because she feels like she has to, and she's putting all of these like
Mhm.
narratives on it of like it needs to be making money, why isn't it making money? So I asked her this question one day, and I said, what if, the divine or God or Jesus or whatever you believe is out there comes to you, the one that knows all, and says, hey, your main role in this whole agenda for everyone, like if you do this perfectly, it will save everyone, is to be a starving artist. How would you act differently? And she's like, I'd be the best damn starving artist there was. And I was like, exactly. Like the weight would be lifted because you wouldn't believe you needed to be this. You would be accepting of where you are right now, right? Like maybe right now you're a starving artist. So it's about accepting where you are in the moment and being okay with it, and not like, to be honest, you don't need anything really. You don't. Like, we feel like we need all of these things, but you truly don't need all of these things. And like you said, Constantine, if you feel like you need them, it's a worthiness story behind it. It's you believing you're only worthy if X, Y, and Z. And when you realize you are wholly abundant and worthy, far greater than anything in this illusion can bring you, is when it's just like, yeah. Okay.
Beautifully said. Now,
Yeah.
in the example you gave, right? If you were to meet your God, whatever you believe in, and they would tell you the outcome. I mean, in that case, you know the outcome, so that makes it very easy for you to just, assuming you trust, to be like, okay, well, I know what the outcome is,
But
so now
wait,
I can
I'm going to
just
pause you
focus on
there
what
though,
God.
because in the other aspect, when I went to that person, they were struggling, right? Because they should be in a certain place. So didn't they already
Sure.
decide that they know what the outcome should be?
No, I know, but you're deciding versus already being, or something outside of you that has the big picture deciding for you. So I meant, like in the example you gave, what's making the person just be the best starving artist is the fact that the one thing that we put so much weight on, which is outcome, is taken out of the equation,
Mm-hmm.
right?
And they
Because that's already
surrender.
decided, which means
Mm-hmm.
that now you don't have to worry about it. So then it makes you be
Mm-hmm.
like, well, I know what the path is, or
Mm-hmm.
sorry, I know what the destination is. So now the path is going to be the path.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like it releases weight around it, right? So like the question then is like, okay, so if that example will allow us to release the weight around the outcome, how can
Mm-hmm.
we do that in our current situation without having this direct line to God to tell us what the outcome would be?
I already told you. You already know. You end this in zero. Nothing goes with you when you believe you leave this lifetime. You already know that it ends in zero, right? Your remembrance of this lifetime will always end in zero. You don't bring anything with you. So you already know the outcome.
Yes and no, because you have a family, you have people you care about, right? So there's a lot to be said there too, right? Because technically you hear people all the time say this, well, I'm working so hard right now, so then the future generations get taken care of.
Hmm.
Right, and it's not everyone, but you hear that a lot. I mean, I know in my circles, people are like working so hard so that then their grandkids can be taken care of, and their kids, and so on.
But question in regards to that. So that's you predicting if I work hard, I will take care of my grandkids, right? How
Hmm.
many stories out there of people who have done that and are hustling get diagnosed with cancer and all their money is ate up from that, have to claim bankruptcy because some major other thing happens, right? So you actually never even know that outcome.
Yeah, exactly.
So the one outcome you do know though is that you personally will always end in zero when it comes to money and things. So to me, it's like we ask for knowing an outcome, but we've decided that that's not the outcome we want to know. We want to know this outcome. You know what I mean? So then again, there you go, playing with like, no, I've already decided what I'm actually seeking in the outcome. But the outcome is this, and it will always be that, period. So even if, let's say, you save up enough money for the grandchildren, and you see somehow them better themselves from the money you raised or you worked your butt off, right? You will still end in zero, and you have no clue what happens the day after you end in zero, right? For all we know, they go bankrupt. They do this, they do that. So I'm
Or
not
the
saying
system collapses and the money is worthless, right? That's something that people talk
yeah,
about all the time.
yeah. I mean, that's a reality. Like we're headed in any given moment, and countries, like you said, see that all the time. So to me, it's like you're creating a false sense of certainty, right? Like it's never certain. So if
Yeah,
it's
I
never
love it.
actually, yeah, if it's never actually certain, there is one certain though, is it will always end in zero. So if that's the case, then do in the present moment, right? Don't worry about the future. Be fully in the present, and it will figure itself out.
I know that sounds easy, but it can be easy.
Yeah.
And the more I go down this path, the more I realize that, Ashley. So thank you for the reminder for myself and everyone else listening, right? And what comes up for me is like the question I asked, right? That came up is like, because I've had a conversation with someone recently, right? And then you and I kind of debunked it slightly. It's always about asking better questions of oneself, in my opinion, right? Because in that case, if something comes up and you're like, well, but what if this? Ask more questions. Where is it coming from? What is triggering that? Is it coming from the ego or somewhere else? Is it my story or someone else's story?
Mhm.
Because this idea of like, oh, providing for your family and everyone else, is it your story or is it something that you picked up from someone else? And if it's your story, great, perfect. Then go do that.
Well, and what does it look like, right? Like providing to your family for me may look completely different than providing for your
Yes.
family to Paris Hilton, right? Like two like totally different spectrums. So again, that shows you it's a perspective. So that means your perception can change if you're willing to surrender it. Period. So if you're sitting there and you're frustrated and you're angry and you're hurt because you're not providing for your family, like you said, it's a question to ask yourself, well, what do I think providing looks like, and why am I not
Yeah.
doing it, and how can I shift my perspective? Because I'll be honest with you, if you're sitting in a shit storm feeling like shit about yourself, it's not going to help you begin to provide for your family, right? You got to shift that perspective, otherwise it's this spiral down. um
And here's what came up actually. Funny that you mentioned. Oh, this is big. I think for me, it's like, and what if you're already providing and you're enough for your family, right? Because this idea of providing for your family probably comes, and I see it for me, out of a need to feel like you're doing enough, you're being enough, you're
mm-hmm,
creating enough. What if you're already doing that as it
mm-hmm.
is?
Well, it's people
What if you
pleasing.
stop creating tomorrow for your family, or bringing this in, and will everything stop? Will some people live your life? Sure. Would others stick by you? Yes, of course.
But the real question is like, do you stick by yourself? Because everyone is a mirror for you. So you will only see what's actually going on within yourself, which is like a whole different deep dive conversation for us. But yeah, I mean, that goes into like people pleasing and not seeing us as one, and instead seeing us as individuals and seeing you as essentially a god, right? When you feel responsible for someone else, that's you playing god. It's you being this little god that thinks you can manipulate and change people's views about whatever.
It's funny now because, what, as you mentioned, the oneness piece, right? Because we keep going back to that. Well, that also technically means that when you die, yes, this form of you goes to zero, but then everything else goes back in the system. So you're giving back to yourself in everyone.
Mhm.
Anyway, actually, we can go deeper and deeper here. I feel like we had some beautiful conversations between these two episodes. Before I let you go, when we let the beautiful audience go, I know there's probably one thing that's coming up for you. You want to share with us. What would it be?
Mm. To just give yourself grace in the process, and remember you're worth it. I mean, I know you and I, Constantine, go deep on some rabbit holes, and it can be frustrating, it can feel overwhelming, but it really truly is as simple as not choosing the ego, not choosing fear. And there's lots of moments I don't do that. There's lots of moments that Constantine doesn't do that. And it's about
Oh yeah,
giving yourself grace and love in the process. Otherwise, it's completely BS.
absolutely. I'm into that. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
such beautiful conversations as always. If you want to check out more of Ashley, you know where to find her. Big Miracle Energy, and I'll let you add more if you want, Ashley. But also lots of videos under the, I guess, the YouTube Live section for both Ashley's channel and ours here at Unleash Thyself, and you can find more of our conversations dating back to earlier this year. And you're
Yeah.
welcome to watch any of those and give us your feedback. So yeah,
Yeah.
Ashley, anything else in conclusion?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully here by the time this is posted, I will have either an additional playlist on my current Big Miracle Energy YouTube channel, or a whole new YouTube channel, Big Miracle Energy Adventures in Trust. And yeah, we're just really going to share what's coming forward as Patrick and I head out on whatever ever this looks like. I mean, I guess we're currently in it right now, and yeah, I would love for you to follow along, and it'll be interactive. I'm kind of like, let's make this interactive somehow. So yeah,
Awesome. That's exciting. Well, I'll make sure to tune in. So thank you. Thank you, Ashley.
yes,
It's been a pleasure
of
as always. Thank you so much for joining us on this exploration of personal transformation. Your presence and engagement are at the heart of what we do, and I sincerely appreciate you, your time, and thirst for knowledge, inspiration, and empowerment. Please consider showing your support by hitting like, subscribe, leaving a comment, or writing a review. Your engagement not only fuels our mission, but also helps others discover these insights. For more daily guidance on personal transformation across the mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical realms, be sure to visit our website at unleashthyself.com. You can also find us on Instagram at Unleash Thyself Today, TikTok and YouTube at Unleash Thyself, and there we post daily content designed to inspire and empower you on your journey. If you have any specific thoughts, questions, or feedback, I truly value your input. I would love to hear from you. Together, we're building a community united in authenticity and purpose. Once again, thank you for being a part of this movement. Until next time, continue to embrace your true self and live a life on purpose, with purpose. See you in the next episode.